You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, you already know what time it is. You already hit the click. You already clicked that button, so you already know what the show's about. We got the Mormon Mafia Part 3 going on today. And today, joining me, well, as usual, is the same people except minus Lisa today. She was unable to join us. But today, we still got Jin the Ninja, JJ Vance, and Heidi. But before we get into it, I'm going to let them all, plug their own shows and stuff. Jin, please, sir, let everybody know who may not know who you are yet, where they can find your stuff.
Sure. Thanks, boss. So I'm on Twitter, X, Wukong Reborn, or the show account at Threshold Saints, Spotify, Apple at Threshold Saints. Episode with Drizzle from Grand Theft Radio out on Monday, so tomorrow. And thanks, guys, for being on. I've actually really enjoyed every episode that I've been on with Heidi. I've learned tons. Literally, I walk away from the episode with my head just swimming. So thank you, guys, and always a pleasure with JJ. So rock on.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us, Jen, and all your links will be on the bottom of the show notes. And JJ Vance, my man, what is up? Please let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find your stuff.
Nick, as always, appreciate the invite. Jen, always great to join you. Heidi, I'm always looking forward to discussing Mormon stuff with you. JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, not the vice president. Live every Wednesday night, Operation GCD Live, 7 p.m. Eastern Times, YouTube, Rumble, and Twixter. And Fridays, hosted alongside the Occult Rejects here with Nick. We just do a roundtable discussion on conspiracy culture topics with our guests. In fact, we'll be having Heidi as a guest on there here next as well.
Oh, yeah. Looking forward to that. Thank you, JJ.
And I am sorry.
It's all right.
Heidi Luv.
Go ahead. No, hold on. Yeah.
Unfiltered Rise, yes.
I will put JJ's things at the bottom, but I did want to introduce because, a big announcement, a new addition to the Occult Rejects. We finally got Heidi Luv, Unfiltered Rise podcast. I think she's a great researcher. She's probably just as addicted to looking at the Mormons as I am, so I love that. And I just love the work that she does, and I'm very happy to have her part of the team and researching with us. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I am excited to be an Occult Reject. It makes sense. And to be on the board with all of you, that actually is a really big thing for me. So thank you. And I do have a cold today, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, got the best of me. Can't help it.
It happens to the best of us.
Yes. And so I am Heidi Luv of the Unfiltered Rise. Everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. Check me out everywhere, and twice a week on Spotify, once a week on YouTube, because they hate my stuff. Oh. And I'm happy to be here with all of you so much. Thanks.
Well, at least with the YouTube, odds are, well, then again, I think me and JJ I've gotten strikes and he hasn't for the same material. But I think as long as you know that the stuff I drop with you is okay on YouTube, a couple of weeks later you could drop it. It should be okay. It's safe. It's good to go.
I know. I'm always
you can judge me first, I guess.
And people, I guess there's an algorithm. If you normally talk about Mormons and you're talking about Mormons in Germany, for example, I didn't get a strike, but somebody else did. So it's.
Oh, I did a live with White Rabbit one time. You know him, and I got a strike and he didn't. I was like, what the fuck?
That's weird.
Yeah, and we're both live on YouTube. Not to tell on him. Oops, but
Yeah, you're like, what?
Shit.
And like I said, you guys, I didn't want to cancel because this is such a great timing for everything with the JFK files, but my voice is a little crappy, so sorry again.
It's okay. So I guess where do you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll pull these files up if you don't mind. Sure. I'm gonna start out with them because that always helps me keep my place. So we'll add those to the stage, and that will be the easiest way to do. I'll just minimize myself. Hold on one second. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is Sirhan Sirhan, and we're going to talk about him today because we have to talk about RFK is actually more connected with the Mormons than even JFK or anybody. Although, let's admit, Mayhew's fingerprints are on everything, every single time. So Mayhew, quick little recap for people that missed the last one. He is a critical part of the Mormon Mafia, but he really isn't Mormon. He just kind of got labeled that way because he was one of Howard Hughes' main people that took care of business before Gay, this guy's name is Gay, got put in, and they kind of had a little tiff and went back and forth. But so he's critical. He's coming up in the new releases. Of course, that's going to take me 10 years to go through. But yeah, I have been going through little by little, and he's already coming up. So, but this case, even more so, I would say, with the Mormon connection. And so we have more receipts on what exactly happened here. This is a picture of Sirhan Sirhan, which he is still alive, you guys. He is still in prison. He actually was granted parole, and then Newsom said no. And so this man is in his 70s. He has spent the majority of life in prison, and it's actually really sad when you find out his whole story. So we'll start out with a little bit of his background, because I don't think that you can really know somebody unless you do that. So Sirhan Sirhan was born March 19, 1944 in Jerusalem. He is Palestinian, but he was Orthodox Christian. His mother actually worked for the Presbyterian Church, and he saw some pretty horrific things as a kid. And I'm going to just list these, but this will come into play possibly later. His brother was ran over by a truck and killed. His home was bombed. He brought water in a pail for the family, and there was an arm in it.
What?
The home, was destroyed. The sister died of leukemia. The dad left and abandoned the family right after they got here and went back to Jerusalem. So, it's not like this kid had an easy life. And now we're going to add one more thing on top of it. He's 5'4". So that's rough. Growing up, he had, he had a hard time, but he put his shortness to some good works because he wanted to be a jockey. And so, if you're going to do anything, that's a cool thing to do. You don't have to do that, but I'm just saying that's a good way to channel your energy. And he was, the perfect build. He was slight built, and he was known to be a groomer of the horses, not kids.
I was wondering actually when you said that. My mind started to go
Yes.
there too, not even realize we're talking about horses here.
Yes, and he exercised them and he groomed them, and he just loved horses. And the funny thing is all the people that worked with him, all these things they want to say, oh, he was this radical Palestinian guy. First of all, remember, he's Christian. Okay. It doesn't even make sense. They pick I don't know what they did here. It was Cracker Jacks. And then on top of it, he was very interactive with all the people at the racetrack. He would go out with his friends. He was, fun. He would stick up for people about rights and trying to, make it better for people that weren't from America. He also hung out and was known that he went to places okay, get ready for the laugh, topless bars, like the Briar Patch and the Cat Patch. So he did go out with his buddies to some fun places. And the funny thing is, though, when you're talking about these places, especially in 1966, when he was working here and at Del Rio, he was known and hung out with many mobsters. Okay. The mobsters were kind of known to hang out there a lot. And these people, kind of hooked him up with a better place to be than this one. And so when he ends up getting a better job, he ends up going to one of these places that were ran by Desi Arnaz. Desi Arnaz, Buddy Epson, and Del Robertson, funny enough, at the Grand Havista Del Rio Ranch. But there he looks like it's going to be pretty promising. I did try to find a photo, but they're all weird and it's a private ranch. So it was black and white pastures. It wasn't cool like this one. And he was thrown from a horse there, and it forever changed his life. It probably led him into this whole situation. So he actually lost consciousness, was in a semi-coma, and had a residual. And this happened in September of 1966. And so he just was never the same after that. And he just completely had tons of personality changes, very much so with, anything that you look at with a frontal head injury for sure, or TBI in general. But it had been going on. This is from the declassified papers just because we're going to get into this. But this is going to talk about him and what he was doing during this time, because he quits jockeying and he ends up hooking up with this guy. And this guy, I can't find a photo of him at all. And it was just really strange. And it's his really good friend. And his really good friend is super older than him. He's like in his 40s, and Sirhan Sirhan's young in his 20s. His name is Walter Thomas Rathke. Well, they were already watching him for some reason. I'm not really sure, but they had this and other things already downloaded to FBI files before anything ever happened, right? So we're already looking at a patsy situation. Sirhan Sirhan had continuous pain in his left eye after this, and he was looking for relief and was really into like everything Eastern in the 60s, right? It's starting to come out. It's like cool. He gets really into this friend at Amarak, and Rathke introduces him, and he joins. He becomes a Rosicrucian. And this is like notated on that previous slide. If you guys look, it says so. Like there's receipts there so that people don't say, oh, yeah, it's not true. He wasn't. Well, he was. And he was extremely interested in the occult and theosophy during this time where he's like getting hypnotized and searching out to be cured of this pain in his eye. And he also wins a small settlement at this time from like workman's comp. And I mean, remember, it's the 60s. He got like $1,700, I think it was, which he decided he's just going to like bet all his money on horses, and that was going to be a good idea. TBI, not a good idea. So he's doing all this stuff. He's studying, but he's also like blowing his money. His mom's getting worried. Everybody's kind of getting worried about him at this point because he's hanging out with this super older guy. And it is rumored, I don't know, we can't substantiate it as this says, that he actually met Manly P. Hall and was hypnotized by him for pain. So
I can't let that guy hypnotize me for anything. Get the fuck out.
And here's the thing. This Rathke, like really in the 60s, I've found pictures of everybody else. It's nowhere. It is nowhere. And not even in the FBI files with this, nothing. His name is all over it, but himself, no. So people are like, that's probably very much his Demorenschild. You know, this guy is teaching him things and showing him stuff, and then, you know, like disappears into the night and never had a photo. That seems strange, especially when the police pulled him in for interviews. I mean, there's some fishiness there. But like I said, he was very interested in getting hypnotized. He sought this out himself. And back then, as we know, when they're doing the MK Ultra program, they are searching for people in exactly that type of situation. And they would be looking through like, you know, records of people searching for help with pain or whatever for hypnotism to see how well they were hypnotized. Although I will say, I don't think he stood a chance, because we're going to talk about why. This guy, I'm so glad JJ's here. JJ, feel free to join me on this one in just a second here, because this is really interesting. So this guy is known to be one of the best hypnotists ever. This is Dr. William Joseph Bryant. He was the president of American Institution of Hypnosis. He worked for the Air Force. He was MK Ultra. He was in charge of all this stuff, including the Boston Strangler case with DeSalvo and hypnotizing him. And it gets really interesting because, like I said, he is out searching for all this stuff. And all of a sudden, when he quits the racetrack and he disappears, his mom is like, where's my kid? Because he's only like 20 something. And he goes into something called the fog. And this is what they've named it, not me. None of these things that are named are me, like the Mormon Mafia, all that is other people naming this stuff. So they said that this was 3 months where he disappears. Nobody can trail him, not even the CIA or FBI. They never said they knew where he was, which I think they did, but that's fine. And William Joseph Bryant, he's a character. He suddenly goes on at a later point and goes on a radio station after this all blows up, because we all know what the end of the story is. And he dies like immediately after. He actually died like pretty awesome, I have to say. Like he died with 2 hookers in Vegas. in the bed. But it made a problem for him because I guess he liked to talk, and so this was a problem because he told these girls, "Hey, I did this to Sirhan Sirhan and da 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 da, and you're going to hear all about me soon." And he kind of bragged himself up, and then he died. He was only in his 50s. But he was well known for his services. I will tell you guys that he was known to go in with actual CIA people, like in a big boardroom with over 30 CIA and FBI agents, and he hypnotized all of them like that quick. He also was implicated with the whole Manson stuff. JJ, anything on the good doctor?
Absolutely. And I'd like to also add to the point you made there of his death. I believe that was his own sex hypnosis seminar that he was hosting there in Vegas. Yes. He was the host of the sex seminar. What a great thing for a ritual sex cult, activity, right? To have your own sex seminars with hypnosis, right?
I mean, hello, harnessing of energy. Brilliant. So brilliant. He was a smart guy.
So I think those are, to me, that's why the most important characteristic of why he's connected to the Manson storyline. So you just inadvertently identified, Heidi, the top two suspects in what is known as the head Shingon within the process for Pi movement, according to researchers such as Ed Sanders, who pegged Manly P. Hall as this character who would later lead this kind of offshoot, very ritual sacrifice, very sex rituals going on, even more extreme than other components of the cult. So Sanders,
and look at what Manson did. Look at what Manson did. What did he do to the girls? Yeah.
Well, he was pimping those girls out, right? I mean, he what's often not known about Manson is prior to this whole era where he's got these women in tow everywhere, the Hollywood, stars and singers of Hollywood. He's running a modeling agency down on Sunset Strip, the Star Modeling Agency. So that's
Manson
where he started recruiting these girls.
All over it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
He knows some stuff. Like when you see him do his little funny dance, and I know we talked about this on our upcoming episode that I'm going to release, but people failed to see, they laughed, and I was like, wait a minute. What's he doing? He knew
Putting
stuff.
You in trance.
Exactly. I was like, oh.
I just want to, sorry, JJ.
No worries. Go ahead.
I just want to jump in really quick before we get too far away. When Heidi was talking about Sirhan Sirhan, him being a jockey or maybe possibly wanting to be a jockey but being around horses, there is something very metaphysically implicative about that. You could say that there's especially for his Rosicrucian connections, because the symbol of St. George, which is obviously the Rosicrucian saint, even the term riding the dragon, that can be a term in sex. I'm not being funny. It can mean reverse cowgirl, but it can also refer to looking at the icon of St. George, the dragon slayer, and saying that the white horse is in fact the dragon at its higher potentiality. It's higher current or higher frequency. So sorry, I just wanted to add that really quick, and I'm done now.
Always interject, you guys, because I can't see you, and so I'm just seeing slides. So always interject, because I think it's fun to have a good discussion.
Yeah, for sure. If I may put a bookend on some of those Manly P. Hall and other notes here. I know Jen can speak more to what I'm referring to in this cult system that is alleged that Manly P. Hall was running by Ed Sanders, this 4-Pi movement, but because it's a lot of Eastern mysticism of varying fashions that seemingly don't mix but are mashed together in their little system there. And it is interesting. These are the years preceding this time, so the process doesn't come until 68. But this is seemingly Sirhan's interactions. I like to call them double Sirhan interactions with these folks. William Joseph Bryant and Manly P. Hall in the years preceding that. Now, William Joseph Bryant's connection to the Manson family would also have folks later, even Ed Sanders, looking into him being the possibility of being this head Shingon, which was a name Charlie went by and was known by at times he was known as the head Shingon. I believe these characters would be the grand Shingon. This is some sort of hierarchy of leadership, though. But this Shingon term goes back to Asia and some Eastern mysticism.
Well, and he specifically mentions, I don't know if you know this, these are from his notebook, but he specifically also mentions, and I didn't take pictures of every single page because they're a lot, and I do want to tell people they're at Sirhan researcher.com if you want to see the full notebook. It's really repetitive, and he does mention Kutumi in his notebook, just to your point.
What's that mean?
Oh, it's like the top too. Jen, do you know about? No. Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I know
Okay,
that-
so they just said it was like the top, like kind of the Grand Shingon in like
Right.
Theosophy, Rosicrucianism type stuff. They even said when I was researching it that this was something they wouldn't speak of lightly and normally would not even be brought up, which may play to the part why nobody knows.
Sorry. It took me a second. Okay, I do understand. Okay.
I might be saying it wrong.
No. It's totally. I mean, that's what it wasn't that you're mispronouncing it. It's that it didn't click for me. So I think the word is like Xinyan, like the French for bun, but it's also like the Buddhist, like how you see when you see Buddha and he has his little curly hairs, but he's got like a little bun. That's called an Ushnishinijaya, and that's what it's called, a Xinyan. That's how it's often translated. So I think that's actually what it's referring to.
Okay. Yeah, this one was let's see, let me find it. The Kutumi, K-T-U-M-I, Master Kutumi. And so I don't know, like I said, other than what I studied, and people said that was like the top, and they didn't mention its name hardly ever, that it was strange that he would even write it, that it's not even supposed to be like that. So these are all excerpts from his random notebooks, and most of them are like literally Sirhan. It's really weird. Like, it's just repetitive and crazy. Like, these were the most important ones I felt for me, but I did provide the link there so people can go see that. And if you want to add it in, Nick, I'll send it to you. But like I said, you can see Illuminati here. You can see that right here. It's weird. He repeats just like a normal hypnotist person, like hypnotized person. They'll do this automatic writing of repeating, and then every once in a while it will make sense, and he'll be like, send money to my mom. And then a lot of times in this 3-month period was when this notebook was supposedly mostly written, when he has disappeared, and he is writing things like hungry food. There's some weird stuff that they're possibly mentally abusing him here, like MK Ultra abusing him. So it's really strange. I went through and studied these, the deciphering of a lot of these, and it was kind of sad. And he also ends up writing in his, home language. He ends up doing a lot of that, but it's really repetitive. See, like of, like he does, it's really weird. I mean, really, they are worth taking a look at. So I just really recommend everybody going to check that out, because they were super interesting, and they're going to lead us even further into this whole situation. So I'm going to actually start with these photos here, because I think they play better. At some point, sir.
If you don't mind, real quick, I did want to add something that Jen had said earlier, because I was kind of like thinking the same thing about his jockey stuff. Not that I'm saying it didn't happen. It's just interesting how, like, sometimes, like, it could be just, I'm just always thinking of occult symbolism, or maybe it's because I'm stoned. Like, even the story with him, like with the jockey, and then going into like a coma. I mean, I thought of like the Chariot rider, and then
that's
I guess
true.
at the end, like, he kind of maybe crossed the abyss and went somewhere else.
Well, and they said he dang near died. They thought he was gonna die, so that even makes more sense, plus the fact, like, who he was surrounding himself with, even though it was strange that he would be, I guess he's not he's not white, and he was with all these people that were like white nationalists, like but it gets weird. I mean, they kind of treated him bad, and he actually spoke up for their rights, and he tried to like say no in a nice way. He was never, they said, even though he was super passionate about it, he never raised his voice. He was super good friends with everyone. Like, it just seems very out of character for what's going to happen here soon.
Heidi, may I interject on this white nationalist point you just made?
Of course.
So I think the proper context, it does seem odd, right? Because this Christian Palestinian man hanging out with white nationalists, this seems like an odd environment to be in. But I would suggest that the connecting principle between these folks, Double Sirhan and the white nationalists, is the process church of the final judgment and their Nazi ideology.
Yes, I think so, because he was extremely involved with it, and everybody knew it. They said he literally, the word they used was obsessed with occultism afterwards. So it makes sense. And I mean, they're obviously programming him. Like the Notebook, it's a whole bunch of pages. When you look through them, you're like, whoa, brain scramble, It's
and
sad.
just to the note of his double Sirhan's connections to the process, in the book of Ed Sanders published The Family on Charles Manson, an article or the chapter on the process was removed in America, but it's remained in print in the UK today still, as he won the lawsuit over there, and the American publisher just folded. But in there, Sanders cites a 1974 INS investigatory report citing that Sirhan, their double Sirhan, was attending ritual sex magic parties with a English cult at Sharon Tate's house in June of '68, just immediately preceding these events here of RFK and double Sirhan.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to get into even more links with this when we talk about our next person, but I do want to quickly mention about programming with this girl. And this is considered the girl in the polka dot dress. And I will say she comes up, and she even there was like eyewitnesses. This lady's last name was Serrano, and she was on like the stairs, and she comes running out and she says, "We did it." And she's like, "What the hell? Like what?" And she's like, "We shot Senator Kennedy." And then runs away. And so she gives this testimony until they pressured her so badly after telling her she failed a lie detector, all these things. Like they scared her basically out of her testimony. And she held on to it for a long time, for years. And this girl, other people saw her. It wasn't just one. Other people actually saw her do what I'm going to describe right now, because Sirhan went to the Ambassador Hotel. He was trying to pick up girls. And I think you just explained why, for sexual good time. I think he was pretty into that. He was very into, all of that movement at that point, and he didn't often score well, I guess. And so he was kind of known for drinking a little bit, and he got kind of drunk. They said he had 4 Tom Collins, and that he went to go leave, and he got to his car and he thought, I can't drive. And that is when he retrieved the gun from the glove compartment. And he goes back into the hotel, and this girl in the polka dot dress helps him get a cup of coffee, but she doesn't take him where the coffee normally is. She takes him over to like a separate area where there was a carafe, and she sits him down and gets it for him. But people were watching because they thought it was odd. And they literally saw her pinch him, turn him around. Literally, when we say handler, like physically turn him around in like a circle. And then all of a sudden she's like, Senator Kennedy's coming. And that was his turn on, like literal. And then he starts shooting his gun. So he, to this day, states he does not remember this. Okay. They have literally gone over this again and again. And a lot of times he was like told, no, you can't be forgiven on parole or anything because you're not sorry. Well, let's also dig into this. They did not put this in his case. He had a blood alcohol level of 1.6 when he was arrested.
All right, a few drinks.
He weighed 120 pounds.
Sorry, Heidi, I'm going to jump in really quick.
You're good.
So the girl thing, that totally makes sense. I mean, and JJ and Nick know like about all these like guys that are connected to the network, we'll call it, or the cult network. They're all like hypersexual, because it makes sense that he's really into girls. That's even that kind of like if you want to think of the St. George figure in a Kabbalistic way, that would have a provocation of being hypersexual to walk that path. So it completely makes sense to me. And then even what you're saying about the sort of the code, like where he's like kind of like tranced into shooting his gun, that completely makes sense to me in a way, because if they're doing like these, I've never been to anything like that, but if I can understand, like conceptually, they're doing like rhythmic sex parties, because that's pretty much what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to like mass initiate people into like a tantra, is basically how I understand it. So they're doing like these group sex rituals, I guess, and it's probably very rhythmic, probably to drums, because that in their conception, right, a very hippie conception, that's what it would be like. So I could see like you would be very very suggestible in a state like that. And then there's also an idea in Tantra that the female consort, she's able to be possessed. It's not possessed like channeling or anything like that. It's just like small movements or words that she says, it can have considered to be higher meaning. So even to have like a woman be the trigger for his like MK-ness, that's interesting to me from like what you're saying,
Handler.
because that makes sense for like weird sex yoga and all that stuff.
Right. And I mean, look at the doctor, like how he died and everything. Like he's yapping his mouth, even though he knows like what the problems could be. He's not afraid. And he's just like, I'm the all powerful, like screw off. Like I'm going to go on a radio show, actually a Mormon owned radio show, to spew all this onto a radio. And he like immediately died after. So, I mean, big surprise, right? His dad was also high up. I suggest people look at his background in politics. It's a lot.
To say it.
So you guys didn't hear about Thane Eugene Cesar at all yet, right?
No. Oh, is this?
Did you hear-
Is
He's
this?
from
Okay.
the Philippines, right? I think you mentioned that, and then we cut out.
Well-
Mormon radio station, Philippines, and then radio
The
silence.
guy that owned Skunk Works was born ran Skunk Works, was born in the Philippines. This guy right
And
here.
Rich.
Yes, and he's a Mormon. This is my big connect here is, he's the head of Lockheed Skunk Works. He was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Of course he was. And he is the head of these special operations. And you have to remember, okay, Thane Eugene Cesar is supposed to be a plumber there. Okay, just a plumber. And no big deal with that job. And he takes this other job, moonlighting, because he's going bankrupt and he does file for bankruptcy and whatnot. But I like to show where he worked previously. So if you look down here at the bottom, earlier employers include General Motors, the Mormon Church. And so right here, these are quotes from RFK Jr. So this was an interview they did with him. And they do hypothesize, including RFK Jr., that Cesar was the second gunman the night that all this happened, and especially with the autopsy, which we'll get back to. So it's interesting to me that he's a plumber, but he had the highest level security clearance at Lockheed, especially at the weapons plant. He also worked for Hughes.
Maybe he was a
Aircraft
plumber, like an E. Howard
Right.
Hunt style plumber.
Yeah, I knew exactly how, because
Like
he worked for the Mullen Company for Bob Bennett. But yeah,
Right.
so yes, exactly true. And what we know is, even though this area was super busy and he'd only worked for Ace through this whole security gig for 3 days, he comes that night and he is leading by the arm RFK into this area that they're not supposed to be in, okay, at all. And it ends up backing him into a pantry. And it's so busy in there, like he's saying hello to everybody. Like, you can see there's this hustle and bustle in this back kitchen, and there's a lot going on. They're supposed to be moving on to their next talk. And so this was right, like energy's high. They're already like saying, oh, we're going to move on to Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And all of this literally pops off and it's not good. And so when it does, they've actually been quoted as saying that he had superhuman strength at this point when they were trying to apprehend him. And so this is a picture of them apprehending. Here is Thane Eugene Cesar, and he is missing something that all of the security guards have on, and that's his tie. And his tie laid on the floor at Robert Kennedy's feet. And he was shot.
Do we know what color the tie was?
They're all dark like this. I don't know if this is a
Okay.
navy or like a black, but it was a dark tie. And they said it was laying on the floor. Like there were multiple people that said that this was the case. Also, if you guys know anything about how RFK dies, he gets shot, and we're going to talk more about the autopsy with Noguchi, kind of back behind the ear. And I'll show this. It's going to be coming up. And he doesn't die on the scene. He actually had heart massage in the 60s to be kept alive, which is, I wonder if it was like just exterior. Being a nurse, I was like, oh my gosh, cardiac massage until they could get him in for surgery, even though despite his extensive neurological damage. And that's what eventually took him. It wasn't looking good for him. But it does say who is behind him in the pantry, right? It's Thane Eugene Cesar. And right here it says he died from the gunshots to his back. Okay, so this is super interesting because we're going to get into a whole bunch of reasons why. And you have to understand how Thane Eugene Cesar thought of people. He was originally from Cuba. And this is his quote. And I listened to this whole thing. He actually was on a program. And this was his quote. I definitely wouldn't have voted for Bobby Kennedy. He had the same ideas as John did, and John sold our country down the road. He gave the country to the commies and the minorities. He said, here, you take over, you run the white man. Blacks have been cramming this integrated idea down our throats for 8 years. You learn to hate them. One of these days, at the rate they're going to be a civil war in this country, and the blacks will never win. And then, so Caesar was a bigot who hated the Kennedys for their advocacy of civil rights. I had plans to meet Thane Eugene Cesar. This is RFK's quotes himself in the Philippines until he demanded $25,000 through his agent. So
Dan Moldea, Agent Dan Moldea,
yes.
He's suspect. He's super suspect. That's
well, and how about this war? Like, what are we hearing about at this time with Charlie? You know?
Absolutely.
War.
Oh, absolutely. This is process theology right here in the Nazi ideology, the race wars, and from yes. I like to point out an anti-Castro Cuban.
Yep, exactly. And then he flees. And where did he go? He went to where until he died? The Philippines. And who was born in the Philippines? His boss. It's a little weird. I wonder if he flew him on his awesome, jet on the stealth technology, right? Who knows? But he did disappear, that's for sure. And so, like I said, there was problems with this whole situation with JFK and RFK. They knew he was never going to let it go. And if he got into the position where he was back as a president, they knew they were done. They knew, all of them. And everybody wants to say, oh, it's Israel. It's this, it's all of them. Mayhew is all over this thing. And Mayhew has ties to everyone. Like, I can't believe that they don't mention more about Mayhew. He's linked to the Onassis. He's linked to everything. He's linked to Castro. He's linked to the Bay of Pigs. He's linked to Hughes. He's linked everywhere. He is all over these papers. I mean, it's crazy. And so the old ones, at least, I don't know about the new. I know Lisa tagged me in one, and it did mention him again. And I'm like, it doesn't surprise me. Mayhew is always all over it. And how did Howard Hughes react when they told him about equal opportunity? He said, I don't care. I'm not doing it. Make it go away. So that gets weird, and they were trying to tell him, like, we can't. It's like a law. He didn't care. And whose ideology lines up with that ideology, JJ?
I mean, it's a very Nazi-like approach to doing business, it sounds like.
And the Mormons, like, this is the time frame
right
where they are literally being pushed into doing some weird stuff, right? Like, that they didn't want to do.
Mormons love white nationalism.
Yes.
Yeah, Mormons love white nationalism. They kept that going to 78, right?
Yes, right around this time frame.
Not 18.
Do you know what Nixon, and we're going to bring him up, Don Nixon said about the Mormons after they gave in? That they were like basically mamby-pamby, like pieces of crap. And I think it very well may have been what helped bring his brother down, because he might have been talking crap way before it went on the papers. And I think they were trying to tell them, look, we got to look right, just like polygamy. We got to look better than we're looking right now, or this is not going to work. And I think they saw the writing on the wall, and other people just didn't,
Interesting.
And so these are the real photos from that kid. And this is a really famous photo. And it's just really sad. There was one of his wife too, and he was holding a crucifix that somebody had given him at that time. So it's just a really sad situation. But when they did apprehend him, I have to tell you guys, they said he had superhuman strength. at 5'4". Thane Eugene Cesar, look at all these guys. They're huge compared to him. Thane Eugene Cesar's a big boy. Like, he was big. And nobody could get the gun from him. Nobody. But the funny thing about the gun is, even in their own investigation, when they're trying to do all this stuff, right? They blew it so bad. Thane Eugene Cesar sold his gun. This gun was sold and not taken into custody, even though multiple people saw him pull his gun out at the time of the shooting. He said he was getting ready to fire back, but he had it out of the holster. He sells it to this guy. Yoder is his last name. He puts a serial number, everything. This guy's got, you guys can look him up. He's still got pictures with the gun, the whole deal. And he's like, okay, I bought it. And he said, oh, I sold that a long time ago. No, he sold it right after this went down. And he told this Yoder guy, hey, be careful with this gun. It was involved in a police shooting.
Yoder, huh?
So,
That sounds like a good German name, doesn't it?
Oh, it totally does. Yoder. Yeah. Like, what? And so this is interesting, but not only is that the interesting part, we've got the bullets where, okay, this bullet, all these bullets, they counted everywhere. I think they said there was a total of 13. Interesting number anyway, but his gun didn't hold 13 rounds. We're talking old days, guys. Okay. And
sorry, Heidi, let me interrupt really quickly.
You're good.
Is 13 a significant number in Mormon theology?
No, I'm just being a smart aleck.
No, it is a very metaphysically significant number. It's a Kabbalistic.
Right. But Mormons, they're not going to tell us if it is. But occult, yes.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Right. And so no way that this thing was able to shoot off this many rounds, and people died, not just RFK. Paul Schrade was critically injured. There was, I think, reporters that got killed. I mean, multiple people are shot at this point, and yet they don't take the firearms. Are you crazy? They don't do any of the stuff. You know what they said, that Thane Eugene Cesar said, I'd prefer not to be involved in the investigation. What? I'm sure you would, but I thought we're doing real police work. So I don't think they did anything that they were supposed to do as far as this. They didn't take his handgun. They didn't run any tests to see if he had gunpowder residue. They didn't do any of it. And so the LAPD really screwed this up. And this diagram from Thomas Noguchi is what killed him. Now you can see where it is that it shot. These shots are coming from behind. Sirhan Sirhan was never behind RFK, ever. The only person behind RFK is Thane Eugene Cesar. So they can say he wasn't the second shooter all day long, but this doesn't lie. So and I don't know if you guys know that Thomas Noguchi, he decided, because of all of the problems with JFK's autopsy, he called in the head of every single department, from the Air Force, Marine Corps, all of them. He had all these heads of all these government things come in, the doctors of them, and watch him do this autopsy. They called it the perfect autopsy because it was so detailed and so watched. He just didn't want any more crap like what had happened with JFK. And so, because this is right after MLK, which we'll do as well. But I'm just saying, he knew it was a big deal. So what do they do to Thomas Noguchi? Does anybody know?
No.
Through this hearing? So they completely destroy his character and try to get him thrown off the case because he won't play ball. And he was also the one that did Marilyn Monroe's. He's considered the autopsies to the stars, literally. And he would not change his story. They humiliated him. They said weird stuff about him getting naked and all kinds of weird things in autopsies, try to get him thrown off the case. And the damage was done. He refused to change his story, but it really hurt him. And he actually lost his position for a short time, and he sued them and got reinstated. But it really messed with him. It really messed with his career and life for the rest of his life, because he would not play ball with them. He was not going to do that. And poor Sirhan Sirhan, he's off in prison forever, and they don't even care. They just left him there. And the bad thing is, like I said, he doesn't remember anything. He remembers zero. And so this is him. This is his newest picture. That's why I showed him side by side. This is sad. They wouldn't even let him out at age of 76 to live with his brother because Newsom said so. But, the Kennedys, RFK Jr. is literally fighting for his release. So that tells you a lot when you're talking about the whole family dynamic there. Am I still with you guys?
Yes, you're still here.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to get a little bit into Mayhew again, because Mayhew comes up in this. And again, this book that I'm going to reference is Age of Secrets. A lot of my information came from there, and then also through CIA FOIA docs, and also through the websites I provided, because people are always like, oh, well, where'd their research come from? There you go. Multiple videos as well. So this is highly researched. I bet I put like 12 hours just in watch time, not even the rest of it. It's a big rabbit hole. But Mayhew comes up, and in this book from John Meyer, okay, John Meyer was the books guy for Howard Hughes for years and years and years. We talked about him a little bit last time. He's really important, and he's basically ran out of the country. And John Herbert Meyer, he was responsible for Nixon's downfall. He was the most trusted courier of Hughes from 1966 to 70. But what they did to him after that time, because he wouldn't play ball on this whole situation, they forced him to flee from the U.S. He ended up fleeing to Canada. They ended up getting him for an accusation of murder, and they locked him up for like a long time. And he finally got out, and he was chased down by like the CIA in Tonga and England, Japan, all kinds of places. Like, this is wild. Even charged him with tax fraud, forgery, all kinds of stuff. And basically he was completely threatened and stalked for years upon years upon years. And Bill Gay hired Meyer originally, and he was the one that also did all the AEC work for the bombs, and he was trying to get them to stop bombing. We all know why, right? The occult connection there. And the aliens and different stuff, because they kept telling them, what do they always tell all of them? The 9, all of them, like, stop bombing shit. Stop it. They don't, they're like, you're screwing everything up. So he was trying to say, this is the damage you're doing from setting these off out in the desert. And it was really upsetting to Hughes. This was his main, the Atomic Energy Commission was his main contact for his job. And then also currying back and forth. But one day after this all happened, he was called and he was told, we're meeting Don Nixon for breakfast and schedule it for 8:30. And this is Mayhew and him and Don Nixon. For those that forgot, Don Nixon took a huge bribe from Howard Hughes. Technically, I'll say it correctly, a loan he didn't have to pay back, okay? Ever. This is Don Nixon. This is the brother to Richard Nixon. And he's pretty much the downfall of Nixon. And he takes this money and starts a fast food chain. And he's a big player with Mayhew all the time. And he used to come in all the time and like talk to them, and they would, do these breakfasts. So that wasn't out of the ordinary. So Mayhew and he show up to this breakfast. And interesting enough, the first thing out of his mouth, they embrace and hug and say, and I quote, when Mayhew and Don seen each other, they hug, and Mayhew said, hey, don't worry, that prick is dead. It looks like your brother is in now. And it was the morning of RFK's shooting, like the morning after when he was in the hospital.
Heidi, I just want to think back to something that we said the last recording, is that you were saying that the hosts, whatever, the Elohim or whichever ones they said, were telling them, oh, please don't use the nuclear bomb. There is a theosophical idea, and maybe even a tantric idea, that if you're using this process of like, fusion, like meeting of the polarities, that like you're going to kill the hosts. Like that you're using the host as like the fuel. I know it sounds really weird, but
no,
I've heard
it doesn't.
There's even an online cult. It's called Nuclear Orthodoxy, I know it sounds really bizarre, but ever since the Ukraine-Russia stuff started, there's been like a lot of weird kind of like, I don't know, religious things kind of rise to the surface. But they believe that they want Russia to use nukes. That's the idea anyway, is so then they kill off the Elohim, they kill off the host, so they can only hear the voice of God. Because Orthodoxy is very non-dual, right? They say they have a non-dual doctrine of theology. So they only would relate to like the higher Kabbalistic spheres. They would not want the lower ones, or they would look at the kind of Mormon way of approaching it as the lower Sephra.
Right. No,
sorry, I just wanted to say that.
No, I think it's good. You know, we have to remember that the Bell helicopter and all of these different intricate things that Hughes is involved with, including the AEC and Meyer and all these politicians. Literally, Hughes has quoted, and don't come after me because I didn't write this one down, as saying, "There would be no men like me if I couldn't buy men." I mean, let's be realistic. You know, we know that man is fallible, and we know that these kind of things go on. But when I'm showing the actual proof of everything, it's very interesting that we can see like where this headed. I mean, clearly. And so I'm going to stop the share. Let's see. There we go. And so, you know, with this book, Age of Secrets, when you listen to it or read it, I did both. He goes into deep detail about like all of these things and exactly how this played into Hughes's empire. And really, it was who calling the shots at the top of Hughes's empire? It's Gay. And Gay is a Mormon. And all of their stuff aligns, you know, everything is aligning down from all of their theology. And so it doesn't take a far stretch for me to say, yeah, that makes total sense. You know, this is all an aligned situation where all of these people are working for the same thing, because we get back into Mayhew. And what did Mayhew have connects with that weren't necessarily nefarious? I mean, sort of, right? He has connections to MI6. He has connections to the X-Files. He has connections to Guy Bannister, because he worked with Guy Bannister for 10 years at the Chicago office of the FBI. So he's right in there with all of them. He literally had delivered politicians, Nixon, Onassis, the King of Saudi Arabia, all these things he's been involved in, and the Bay of Pigs. That is where this begins. And Mayhew just is such a problem for them, because he's completely utilized and can never go away, but him and Gay don't like each other. And so it's this constant like battle of who's going to have the king, right?
Was Thane Eugene Cesar involved in the Bay of Pigs? Being an anti-Castro Cuban, was he one of the forces trained at all? Is there any record of that?
There is no proof, but I would bet good money on that, because every single time I look back to all of these things, I haven't done the deep dive on MLK yet, but I bet it will do the same. It comes up with a few things: Bay of Pigs incident, the Bush clan, and Hughes and the Mormons. It's like always the same situation. And you're like, okay, what's the deal? But in Age of Secrets, Meyer says that after they took Hughes on Thanksgiving, and James O. Golden, the Mormon, took him and threw him on a plane and hurt him in the process, that he was never the same, and that he died way before they said he did. And that they took him there, Meyer, and saw him in a frozen cryogenic state, like he wanted to be. That it wasn't real, like what they did, because they supposedly buried him the next day. No, none of it was real. And he said, I literally sat there staring at him in this cryogenic chamber that I purchased for him. He purchased it. And this guy is literally ran out of town. And I mean, it was bad. And of course, we have to remember Rebozo's involved in this and all kinds, you know, with Nixon.
There you go. I was gonna say, let's not forget the may I add to the mob angle of all this with that Chicago connection you mentioned. I actually didn't know Mayhew worked for Bannister. I knew he was FBI. I didn't know he worked for Bannister in Chicago, but that's interesting considering the Chicago mob element that's all connected to everything you're describing.
Yes,
as well.
he was there for years. I did forget to also mention this. One other person that comes up and also ties right back to the Mormons. Ezra Taft Benson's beloved John Birch Society was funded by H.L. Hunt, the white supremacist, the wealthiest man in America at that time. Hunt was the financial backer of the NOI and Elijah Muhammad due to their support for Black separation from whites. No wonder Ezra Taft Benson knew so much about secret combinations.
Well, there you go. You just mentioned another ancient alien cargo cult with the Nation of Islam, but let's also not forget the process here with another. In fact, the show you and I recently did, you're talking about
coming out Sunday. Actually,
I was saying it was coming up soon. I know you said that. We discussed the crossovers with the process and the Mormons, but relative to FBI situations with Guy Bannister and Mayhew, Tommy Jude Baumler would go be working out of his office in New Orleans after he retires from the FBI. And Tommy Jude Baumler being the guy who incorporated the process.
Yep. And guess who else he was involved with? Johnny Roselli. He's involved with Sam Giancana. He's involved with, he was actually the one that infiltrated Giancana by pretending like he was a mobster. So,
oh, nice.
It was all.
Those were the two Chicago mobsters I was referring to right there. You just nailed them, Giancana and Roselli. Those are very important characters.
Yes. And they were huge in this whole casino situation because he had to actually talk them into getting the hotels for Hughes. And then who shows up? Oh, that's right. E. Perry Thomas, our Mormon financier, who does what? He's smart as hell. He freaking incorporates it and he takes it and he's like, oh, now it's ours. You can't skim off the top. Bye, bitches. Like that was what happened. And so who do you think that money goes to? Howard Hughes Medical Center was the shell company for everything. And why did that happen? So that Howard Hughes could get that huge tax break. Let's not forget it was this payoff from Nixon that the IRS had already said, no, we're not doing it. And guess what? Nixon pushed it through. So this is a big spider web of money. But here's the funniest part. You dumbasses already have all the money. What do you need more money for? Pay taxes. What the hell is wrong with you people? This is crazy to me that he had so much money that he just couldn't. I mean, were you ever going to spend it in your life? Because he still has the money and it's still in Howard Hughes Medical. There's so much money. It's allocated a certain amount per year because he's dead forever and it's still happening. And guess who was kids, right?
He had no heirs.
No. And his cousin ended up with a bunch of it. But all of this stuff goes back under the Howard Hughes Medical. And that's why when it came time for Gay to say, is this Howard Hughes's writing or not with the will, the Mormon will that took 34 years, right, to settle, he said, oh, it's not. Why did he say it's not when that showed up at the Mormon church buildings? Because he had more power running the medical center the way it was. Sure. He didn't want it to go to the church because that takes away his power. And he ran that up until 2 years before he died. I want to talk about skimming off the top. I mean,
I have a suggestion of what they're doing with all this money, Heidi.
Oh, please tell, other than building the Vatican.
No, they're all all these people you're talking about, Hughes included, right? The Lockheed fellow, Ben Rich, the mothership in Salt Lake. They're all trying to get off this planet because they due to their ancient alien cargo cult belief systems.
100%. They believe that. They won't. And you know what, JJ, the funny part is the reason why I know you're right is because they deny it. We don't get, what are you talking about, Kolob? There's no Kolob. We don't have planets anymore. There's no virgins. What do you mean?
Same tale Scientology tells its folks when you start talking about Xenu until you reach a certain level. The Mormons do the same business, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I think it's even worse than the Mormons, because the Mormons are now the Goyim, and they're actually using feminine energy and magic practices, which I will prove when we come back on and talk about this whole Dr. Nathan from Yale and Harvard and these family connections of Massachusetts. How about we go back to the fact that, Joseph Smith's great grandpa was huge up in Massachusetts. He was a statesman. He was involved in the Boston Tea Party. What the hell are you talking about? He's a poor farmer. His brother and his uncle were a mastery, and Jen will love this. He had a mastery of almost like Jesuit knowledge, and they were teaching them these mystery things. He was at the Indian school, and I never could figure out why. Why did Hiram go to the Indian school? I couldn't find it. Finally, this weekend, I fell down the rabbit hole so hard, I hit my little head. And I was like, look, this is because this other cousin, Johnny Smith, worked also at Dartmouth, who had Hiram come there for a professional education to be a priest to the Indians. And this was set up all by like actual people that are high up. Actually, Professor Johnny started the Church of Christ and the pre-existence and all the shit that we always talk about at church. It wasn't even Joseph Smith. The Church of Christ was started by his uncle or cousin, whatever. And it's Professor Johnny. And then Nathan Smith, they say, oh, he's not related. I found it all on your own stupid website, familysearch.org. He is too. He is.
Yes, he
Nick's
is.
having a moment.
Yeah, this is great. I found it on your own site.
Yeah, exactly. Like you
Their
guys
site
wanna
is
pretend
extensive.
like they will. Yeah, they both are. Well, not if you still have a member ID.
I used
But
to
whatever.
use it. I used to use it to look up Mormons.
Yeah, I still got mine too. It comes in handy doing genealogy work.
They haven't kicked me out yet because I'm like a Morgan Taylor. Yeah, I don't know if they're ever going to talk to me. But I don't care if they do. If they do, they do. But this whole Dartmouth thing, why it never also made sense to me. Where did he go after the fact? He goes and starts a medical school at Yale. He started this at Dartmouth and then moves on to Yale. And what the hell is set up here in Utah? Skull and Bones. I mean, it doesn't take a scientist, really, and guess what disappeared when Hiram disappeared? You know why the whole college, he didn't get his full education. Guess why? Because there was a grave robbing court and they were like, you mother effers, stop taking our dead relatives, get the hell out. They drove him out, closed the school. And he was like within months of finishing his whole education that he stayed at Dartmouth there. And they ran him all out of town, which is why they went to Palmyra. Nobody wants to talk about this. And guess what they took with them because they couldn't find it after they left? The Scotichronicon. Oh, they did. And the uncle owned a rare bookshop. Like, come on. It's stupid. They're not poor, dumb farmers.
Okay, so this is something really interesting, Heidi. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, I love it.
okay, first question is, was it the Church of Christ or the Church of Light?
Church of Christ
of
was
Christ.
the first.
Okay, so that I actually like this. Like, if we're saying like a theory of or origin story for Mormonism as like this Martinist,
Yes.
magical, Solomonic,
Yep. 100%.
Christian, liturgical, Hermeticist, kind of American syncretic magic. They're obviously drawing from Native Americans, just as Thomas Jefferson famously did, looking at the Mohawks. We also know that JJ and I have discussed this, like the Mohawk secret societies. There is.
I'm just going to lay this out for you because you mentioned this. So you're not wrong. Do you want to know how Dartmouth College was started? By Reverend Samson Occult. And he was a Christianized heathen, Native American. And some people call him Samuel. And he was where? Where was he from? Oneida. Okay. So Dartmouth was started by this guy and Robert Burns. Okay. And these people and Bezel, I can't say this name. Bezaleal, Woodward.
Beelzebub.
Yes, basically. It's not the bub, but it's like half of it. Beazel? I don't know. And the grandpa's name is Azazel. Oh, wait, it's Azael.
Wait a second.
Yeah. And they're all from Topsfield, Massachusetts. And there's no people here because we're colonizing America and they don't know each other and they're not related.
Sounds like some occult names, though, right?
Right. You want to see the
Sounds
girls.
like a
You
playoff
want to see the
possibly,
girls.
yeah.
Xena, my great ancestor, all these weird names. And I'm like, wait a minute. it doesn't make any sense. All Lucy Mack Smiths are very, very Abrahamic type names, like Moses and, all these Solomon and all these things. I'm like, okay, she knew some stuff too. She knew.
Well,
and
when you speak to these Yale connections, Heidi, it brings to mind one interesting figure in the Mormon, history, and that's Zina Diantha Huntington.
That's my relative. Yes.
No,
yes,
that's one of your
relative.
ancestors. Okay,
Yes.
were you from the Brigham Young marriage or the Joseph Smith unofficial children?
So
marriage.
I not official with Brigham. I'm pretty sure, but I had out the dump book yesterday.
The unofficial
was trying
Smith.
to find it. Yeah, my grandma. No, I think it's on Young's side because she married Young. Because Zena, it's Taylor Young, and so she marries into that. And so
she's a Huntington, right? So the Huntingtons are a very interesting family.
Oh,
she marries both Joseph and Brigham.
Yes.
And then it starts the Women's Relief Society, right? She's credited with that, I believe. And the Huntingtons would do a number of things there, aside from being the folks that started the Skull and Bones you were mentioning. That's Samuel Huntington Russell, right?
What's
and
along
the Hales.
With the Tafts.
And the Hales come into this. And so I just think it's interesting.
Like Nathan Hale?
I didn't look up the first name. I'll tell you the next time we see each other. But I didn't know we were going to.
He was a lieutenant that was murdered in the Revolution. He's coveted as this spy figure in American history.
Well, Samuel, his great-great-grandpa, was the one that organized the Boston Tea Party. And what happened at the Boston Tea Party? I'm talking about Joseph, his great-great-grandpa. And so what happened was they dressed up as what? Native Americans. Oh, does that sound like the Mormon massacre? Like much?
Right.
Like, come on.
Right.
And it's the same damn thing. And they said he literally was the statesman, Captain Samuel Smith. And he was over this whole thing and he arranged it and he didn't go to it because he was like, oh, you peasants go do it. Like, I'm not going. But he was having the town meeting about the Boston Tea Party, literally Joseph's family. So
you just hit on the point I was hoping to bring in here with these families is you said captain, right? So
Captain.
that means he was a member of the secret society that started America, the Society of Cincinnati, right? So
Captain Oshael too, not Ozael. Ozael's dad was Oshael, I believe it was him. Also a captain.
So these are the folks, this organization of the officers of Washington's Army in the Revolution. And again, a very interesting one there, being involved in the Tea Party situations as well, right? So these men all were fascinated, had a deep fascination with the mounds, and so do the Mormons. So I don't know what's your take on the Mormons and their mountain interests.
Oh, for sure. It's all the same. It's just, the Mormons just slapped a different label on the same thing we've always talked about because it's more acceptable to be a Christian denomination of whatever and if they hadn't done the polygamy, honestly, it probably would have freaking took off. Like, honestly, if he'd have left that alone and could have kept it in his pants and not had scrapes and barns, there would probably be Mormons everywhere. Not that there's not a lot of them. Okay. Well, but I
don't think that assassination of Joseph Smith was purely Masonic. This is what I'm getting at with the Society of Cincinnati. So I argue that the hereditary members, the members today that gain membership through the bloodline of their father through their father's father back to the Revolution, these men, once one of these hereditary members gets elected president, that seems to be controversial amongst this crowd. For example, William Henry Harrison dies 31 days into office, right? Abraham Lincoln's murked while he's in office. His grandfather was a captain in the Virginia militia in the wars of 1776. And Joseph Smith, being a hereditary member, who by his own accord, he claimed he was going to be president and dispatched diplomats around the world preceding his assassination.
And ran for president.
Right. So I think that was a big impetus behind that is whatever goes on within these society crowd, they don't like hereditary members also being the president of the United States because by virtue of being president of the United States, you're a member of that society. And
then you have the divine right to rule on top of it, which he spoke about because it leads into the Kingston clan who says what? They're Merovingian. And when I don't know, JJ, if you're like Mormon Pioneer, are you Mormon Pioneer? Did you have your DNA done?
I'm not a Mormon Pioneer. We're a convert. Okay. We're a convert.
Okay.
We're West Virginia converts.
I'm a Mormon Pioneer company. And let me tell you something. When I pull up my DNA thing, it looks like I should have a crown on my head. It's nuts. Like I'm related to all the presidents, almost all these, you know, I'm in the like House of Bourbon, House of New Orleans. I'm related to all these fancy people. And you are like, okay, what did they do? Did they take, this is what I postulate. To start the new world, did they take children that were super important and hide them in plain sight for a later culling of the blood? And they're looking for it now?
Okay, Heidi, let me just interrupt you. There is a concept.
Yes. I mean, short answer, yes.
There is a concept, like most French Canadians can trace their ancestry. Now, I'm not talking about Huguenot, so we're talking about French Catholics, but most French Canadians can trace their ancestry back to 11 filles de roi, children, daughters of the crown. So it's even an interesting, obviously metaphysical number. So just so most people, even including me, can trace at least maternal mRNA line back to these girls. So
right.
It is very interesting if you think about it, like what you're saying, something that Lisa's talked about too, is like there's this idea that the daughter is like the progenitor because she carries with her all the eggs that are going to be with her for her whole life.
Mm-hmm. And why did they want Mormons to have so many kids and procreate the line? And the Kingstons, just so you know, Jen, they keep it in the family and they are like Egyptians and marry their sisters and shit. And they do this because they say they're the bloodline of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's a good point, Heidi, because all of these families think that idea. So you're talking about your lineage that are cousins with all these presidents. Well, that's because all these presidents and your lineage go back to the Knights Templar and so on and so forth, back through the Normans, and they claim to be Merovingians from the birth of, you know, from the line of Jesus, their Jesus and Mary, not the Catholics' Jesus and Mary, right? Not the Christians.
Which is why, think about it, JJ, this is why the whole story, and I got called out on a certain podcast, and I'm just going to say, you can call me out all day, but I do my research. When I said Jesus banged Mary, God banged Mary to make Jesus, that is what they told us when we were little. And I showed it in receipts and made a dumb little song because I'm telling you this, that is what they've always said. And here's the problem with your own theology if you don't believe it's true. You can't be a God one day if you don't think so.
You got to believe it first, right?
Yeah, well, you got to believe that that God was like a man that became a God, right, and that you can become a God just like God did. That is the theology, that he was not placed there by Holy Spirit. In the Mormon theology, it was, and I'll quote it so it sounds nicer because I said it crass. I'll say it. They said he was born of earthly wants and what did they say? Not needs, earthly desires, like any other man. Brigham Young.
Okay, sorry. I just want to correct the record. So it's 800 daughters of the crown, but most French Canadians can trace their lineage back to 17 girls in particular. So it was a magic number, just not the one I thought it was. So I just want to say that. But it's interesting, Heidi, what you're saying right now, because Nick invited me on to interview a really interesting guy. I won't say until that episode drops, but he is associated with Temple of Set. And so he actually is talking about very similar things that they believe, like almost identical, to be honest.
Well, and what Masonic lodge did Joseph Smith join? The French Canadian one. And what Native Americans did they say to inbreed with? Micmac. I am some. So
Micmac. Oh,
wow.
wow.
Really interesting.
Shit.
Their flag is a Templar flag. It even has the sun and the moon and the star. And it's a red cross, obviously. And even the chief of the Micmacs, he went into a magical battle, this is what they said, for 7 days against the Jesuit, I guess they were like priests or whatever they were, but that's what it was, like a 3 of them. It's a magic story, obviously. And so he summons a shark and does like storms, but then the Jesuits win. So what happens is the priest, or the chief, he actually converts. He's like, the magic of the Jesuits was way more powerful. And so him and all of his wives are actually buried out of Starfort. It's kind of interesting.
Ooh.
Oh, that is interesting.
Ooh, I love it. I love that.
I can solve this Micmac mystery. Why they got the Templar connections. So anyone can look up, any folks of the interwebs, maybe y'all folks are not familiar with the storyline, can look up Lonsall Meadows. It's in modern day Nova Scotia, New Scotland, kind of like the Templars of old Scotland. Lonsall Meadows was settled in, I believe, 1066. They agree on 1066. An interesting time. That's when the Normans invaded the UK, Sicily, and clearly America, what is now Nova Scotia. And the Normans, again, were the ancestors to the Knights Templar.
Well, it makes more sense when you put in Martinism with it. If it's Knights Templar and then they are just, carrying on the actual magical practices of the Martinism part, they also have the Elect Nine, with the Ellis Cohen and all this stuff of the elect.
It does go back that far, Heidi. It really does. And speaking to these bloodlines,
I believe it.
George Washington was the descendant from 10 of the Templar Knights that signed Magna Carta, and so these families still, it's not just the Kingstons. These families continue to even outside the Mormon Church, the element of the blue bloods of New England, where the Mormons came from, as you were describing. These families still intertwined today. I mean, looking at my DNA test and family trees, I'm shocked I don't have a 70 IQ, web feet, and a recessed chin line, because that's literally how inbred my tree is. It's more of a family pole than a tree.
Well, then we get into, we come to Utah, and it's what? Called Deseret. What does Deseret mean? Okay, it means the bees, right? It's bees. And then what do the bees have to do with anything? Right? We've got it, a beehive where the beehives stay. Oh, I know, because it goes back to Merovingian.
Right?
Isn't there one on like every boat or something? I could be wrong. That came over here.
Well, here's the thing too, is Napoleon Bonaparte, when he took back his throne and he was Merovingian bloodline, he and his wife, on the day that they were, and if you put it on there, if you do coronation outfit or Napoleon's bee cloak, they sew bees onto their cloaks to symbolize that they are Merovingian. And what does he say that he is? He's Merovingian from Jesus Christ. That's what Joseph says. And so obviously, like I said, not just presidents, but royalty comes up all over my line where I'm a pioneer heritage. Not that it matters for here. I'm just talking about bloodlines. I'm talking about what were they doing and how were they tricking people? Like one of my great grandpas, Talbot, who was, actually in the line, they tried to get him to come back. And he was like, no. And he settled in Kaysville to be a poor farmer. Why would you do that if not for something really important, not in this life? Right?
Right. If I may give you a fun fact about Napoleon Bonaparte there, Heidi. He's also a member of that same group, the Society of Cincinnati. The French have their own chapter. He was a major during the French Revolution. The French Revolution and the American Revolution were sold as separate revolutions. It is same. And so he's on the French chapter.
Well, and obviously these were magical people because like they're all hailing from Massachusetts. Like his great grandpa was involved, Joseph Smith, in the Inquisition on the accusatory side, as we've mentioned. But all of this stuff goes back to royals. Like we can see it, and it didn't just come out of the air. These people didn't really get down on their knees and pray this shit up. Let's get real. It's not happening. This is mystery schools.
Maybe there was a salamander involved.
Oh gosh.
Well,
that's a symbol in occultism though too.
Isn't it both? It's like they both, like
toad.
Everybody says that angel speaks to them, right? That's what everybody says. That's like every magician's favorite story is it speaks to me. But it can be both ancient and like new, and that's fine. And I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying it's a little bit of both, and it always kind of is.
Yeah. And why does every prophet until like way later have a staff? Like a cane, but like a staff. And yeah, I mean, it's right there, but people just, they took it underground because people were getting killed. And I think they just were like, we got to keep this on the DL for the top of the top.
One thing I just want to add real quick, you mentioned the Micmacs and then you mentioned Freemasonry and stuff. Sometimes I do wonder, or I do think that sometimes occultists may actually be influenced by stuff that Native Americans were into. And this is like, one of the symbols for Micmac. And I do want to like show them because I had this book. Well, I had a copy of the PDF.
Very nice.
I mean, it's basically the same shit. Except for the piece
they called Joseph Smith the Hermetic Prophet for a reason. I mean,
he was able to see beyond like the trappings of his system. That's very American too. Like we spoke about this a little bit last time, but there's something very like syncretic about America. Like who comes here and like even like Martinism, they'll say they're Protestant, but they're taking like a little bit from Hermeticism, a little from Rosicrucianism. Like everybody's like kind of putting their own system together. It's never like as clean as they like to pretend.
Well, because they probably lose things along the way. I'll pull up that. I think the Martinist star is really similar to that too, just off at the top of my mind.
I just find it interesting regarding these ceremonial magical elements and whatnot of the Mormon theologies and philosophies here, and why they find the golden plates in a mound. They set up shop in Kirtland on a mound. They go to Independence, Missouri on a mound. They set up in Nauvoo on a mound. Now, arguably, I have no evidence that Salt Lake City had any mounds, but I suspect they did. Who's going to tell us because they're the first ones there? They're not going to be like, oh shit, we found mounds here, because they don't want to talk about mounds today.
JJ, do you remember the cartoon when we were little kids? I don't know whenever you saw it, but when I was a little kid, if you're a convert, it might have been later for you. But there was this cartoon where they showed the blocks for the temple being moved by magic, where they like pointed to them and it was like boing, like this weird 70s boing. And it would just show the blocks being moved. And I'm like, totally makes sense. Like, don't have to sell me on it. Yeah, those blocks were far away from that quarry and they were very heavy.
Well, Salt Lake City, sorry, Heidi, I just thought of this for JJ, but and also Nick's point was really good. I didn't realize how deep it was until I shut up. But, well, isn't it interesting that Salt Lake City could be sort of thought of as a polarity to Mexico City? Because the Ute Indians the native people, the Utes, they are the ones who became the Aztecs.
Oh, about the Romney family in Mexico. That gets
right. So it's just thinking
interesting.
So if you believe like there's like like JJ's loves the mound, so it's like that makes sense because it's like America's like if you build it, the host will come. I guess if you want to make a cargo star god joke. Well,
JJ, do you really think that the temple was fully built here? I think it was already premature existing. I think it was partially here already.
I have a lot of questions, Heidi. I have a lot of questions in regard to a lot of Mormon history. If I can give you one example. I've spent most of my summers of my life, especially as an adult, even in my Air Force career, take 2 weeks of my 30 days in Vermont. And over the years, I started doing genealogy research with my grandfather. And he's not a Mormon. I'm a Mormon. They got me real young. They sprinkled some stuff on me, gave me one of these as an infant in Connecticut when I was a baby. So my mother was a convert from West Virginia, but she was a convert to the DC ward, right, along with her friend Bob Bennett.
Very interesting.
She and Bob were big. That's what she
Bobby boy is a bad boy. He looks nice, but
his nephew was my bishop as a teenager in Cincinnati. Strangely enough, a lot of founding Mormon families in that ward. Not sure what that's about, but this guy in this town in Huntington, Vermont. In fact, it's a town named after the Huntington family because the guy who founded it, a member of the Society of Cincinnati, out of the Connecticut chapter. His mother was a Huntington, so he named the town after his mother. But he died in 1826, and for some reason, his last will and testament says he does not want to be baptized for the dead by those Mormons. So I'm not sure how that happened. I'm going to
put that in my will. I'm going to put that in my will too.
But in 1826, how does that happen? In 1826, there is no baptism for the dead. There is no Mormons.
Oh wow!
And this is a guy again. This is your ancestor, Zina Diana Huntington, would have been a first cousin or second cousin to this guy.
I will find out. Which I pulled that dumb chart out yesterday. It's so confusing.
Yeah, we'll have to converse on those. This guy's a Huntington via his mother Martha Huntington. Martha Huntington's also the grandmother to Useless S. Grant.
Well, and then all the Welsh history that comes over here with them, the very first Book of Mormon ever copied over into another language is Welsh. Why? Because there were so many of them that came to that area that were easily converted. I mean, because it was already, they kind of had some magic in their pocket, right? Like they knew some stuff. So I think it's all really wild. No, you're good.
When you were talking about like the interbreeding with the indigenous people, I was thinking like they and then the Welsh thing. Well, they use the St. George flag. That's like one of their patron saints. It's sort of murky, right? Because there's
St. George is a town in Utah, and there was a George George Smith, not George A. Smith, George Smith, that was actually referred to as St. George.
Oh wow.
In Canada, it was predominantly. Sorry, JJ.
No, go ahead, Jan.
Predominantly here, it was Scottish and French men who married Native women, and that's who were the treaty signatories. JJ and I have discussed this quite at length because I find it very interesting for like especially Western American history, but it's not really American, but it takes place a lot in America. Like the story of the Métis Rebellion, sort of this French Republican uprising, very similar to probably funded by the certain Napoleonic factions against the British Crown. That takes place in Montana, a large part of that story. So it's just really interesting because they're talking like this messianic. It sounds very ghost dance religion to me. If I'm being honest,
well, and
there's a lot of
they wanted to make them white. I mean, that was the quote from Brigham Young, was to marry the natives so that they could make them more white and delightsome and by their children.
You mentioned the families of the Mormons, Heidi. Oh, did I cut out my back? Oh, you mentioned the pioneering families. Isn't it strange? And again, no disrespect to your pioneering heritage. Isn't it strange the political power the pioneering families still maintain in the West?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't just happen. It's set up. There's a hierarchy here, and we see it in this case with RFK. That what the hell would a Mormon have to do with anything like this, right? But they do.
Exactly.
And the big part is, and I venture to state, is because of their alien, quote unquote, alien knowledge. More people I talk to about channeling and that they had people that could do this and all these things. Like, I just think they broke the code because they were able to learn language. And what was Johnny? Oh, Uncle Johnny, a professor of? That's right, language. And so maybe these skills, were passed on naturally or learned, whichever way you want to do it, but it's passed on through the generations, and it opens up lines that we would never know if you couldn't read or hear their tradition. So
for sure, like an epigenetics type of thing, pass the bloodlines type of situation.
I think maybe so, because I know, the Micmac lady that was my great grandma or something. She was like the second wife. And, there's a lot of people that make jokes. Oh, yeah, everybody has a Indian princess. Well, my grandma was a crazy person. She was a genealogy Mormon missionary. So all my stuff's like with pictures and coded and tabbed. And I mean, it's crazy. I pulled it out yesterday and my kids were like, what the hell is that? Like, whoa. And it's like this thick. And
some red strings tied across it.
Right. Yeah, probably. I'm like, this makes sense for certain things, but that joke, everybody's grandma was, maybe that was by design, right?
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense. They even say that the Mohawk are the guardians of the Eastern Gate. Well, that can obviously have a metaphysical implication. I think it's probably like some Crowley shit I don't know about.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And and they hold the wampum belt. So they hold literally probably the Confederate. Well, this is a Canadian conspiracy theory, but they hold a piece of the Confederation through that treaty belt. And the treaty belt, interestingly enough, has swastikas on it.
Of course. Well, of course, you know, I think it's funny that they're so into Native Americans, but then later they're like, no black people though. Okay, whatever. Like, okay, we can't have one kind of brown, but we can have another kind of brown. Okay, whatever. But they're so silly about their backstories.
It's
on
too
them
much
too.
melatonin.
It just makes you really wonder. Yeah, too much melanin. That's
what
too
I
much.
was looking for. Yeah, melanin. Yeah.
Well, that goes to the fact that they think the native folk are the lost tribes, though, right? They're Hebrews, right?
Exactly. And guess what happened to the guy that tried to prove it? Yeah, he got kicked out of the church. So by DNA, he wanted to prove it with DNA because he was such a great member. Every person that's ever tried to prove something, just like the guy that wrote the magical book, I can't remember, the folk magic book, he got kicked out too. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, they definitely don't like the recognition of the magic today, right? So in regard to the number 13 we discussed earlier, I mean, it should be like, you know, seemingly they don't want to recognize it, but looking at the articles of faith, right, there's 13 articles of faith, right? So even at the root system, there's, in Mormonism, we got some seemingly magical situations going on, right, with 13 core beliefs, right, the articles of faith by Joseph Smith.
Yeah,
they're so similar. They're so similar, Jen, to the things that you would do if you were preparing for what? The Abramelin or other rituals. Like,
well, even the number 13, I mean, just as a very basic Kabbalah idea, you have, like, that's the Hasidic number, right? 13. And then you can also say the inverse is 31 because it's like the three, you take three elements to get one, or you distill one element into three. So there's like both of those ideas with it, but it's also the infinite, like, you know how we talked about how he had a pentacle of Jupiter and a dagger of Mars. Well, this would be definitely drawing from that, like, Jupiter kind of like energy. It's like an infinite in expanse. So that's kind of the idea. So you can draw a lot of wealth and high honors and like all that stuff.
And look at them now. Look at them now. I dare say they have accomplished their goals, and everybody is at this table. They see all this stuff going on with the heifers and the end of world stuff. And I don't know if it's real or if it's constructed, but I do know this. Everybody went, okay, show your cards. We're going to do a call. And then all of a sudden the Mormon church buys the Abbey. Okay, that's weird. And then they build down the street from the Vatican, and then they build their own Vatican. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And everybody's just missing it. You want to know why? Because they're the nicest people. They're just so fucking nice. So sorry, I cussed.
I'm just waiting for all these ancient alien cargo cults one day, for all these ancient alien cargo cults to suddenly combine Voltron style. You know what I mean? Like, that's all I'm waiting for.
That's what's going to happen. Voltron. They're going to do a culling. Yeah.
Yeah. Scientology, Nation of Islam, well, they're the same thing now. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, you know,
that's all the same.
That's Scientology. So I mean, they're all going to come together, Voltron style, you know, Thelema, you know, all these things.
It's scary to know how many of them. Think about it, JJ. Think about how many would go together. Think about that and the power within that.
Oh, for sure. Yes, ma'am. I've been mapping these ancient alien cargo cults for years. There's a lot of them. They come in all shapes and sizes, but they all do the same things and they all get along. So that's what I'm saying. I'm waiting for one day they're just going to be like, oh, we're all the same organization. Ta-da.
Well, even the Masons, who do they answer to ultimately? Like we talked earlier about, like, the top guy, right? And who is the top guy and how they refer. The same thing in Masons. They say what? It's like a esoteric power top guy, and he's the one. Yeah. And you know, and so it makes sense. Like, it's just a different style, right? Everybody put their flair on it and twisted it around. That's all it is.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that the Vatican's not an ancient alien cargo cult, because they're
absolutely.
They definitely are. And I'm not saying that even in a pejorative, but I think that you can make a very good case that the Rosicrucian strain, like, whatever, if there's factions, I don't know. I do agree with you though, JJ, that factions are a really good way to explain parapolitics. It makes a lot more sense. So, yes. I think definitely Catholicism can be thought of, like, what is Gnosticism really? It's a broad category. It's a broad body of literature. All the kayfabe around, like, what the church fathers did, like, most people don't even really know that. Let's be honest. So it's really hard to say like what is Gnosticism, what is heterodox, what is Orthodox. It's just like it's all flavors of kind of like exactly like Heidi said. It's kind of a spin-off, just like all the.
Well, this is why.
Sometimes
Yeah, that's why Masonry just says you have to believe in a higher power.
You know, a lot of times I've even said, I thought myself, a lot of it is kind of like occulted or like bringing like Kabbalistic ideas into Catholicism. And, you know, at some point, like I do mention over and over again, at some point in the Catholic Church, that was actually a big thing to do, where they thought it was actually, you know, bringing breakthrough ideas and understanding the Bible in an occult sense more. So maybe that idea is still, you know, being used in other ways.
That's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Wow.
That's why I've always looked at it like that, because I mean, if you really do think about it, a lot of times when you looked at a lot of Gnostic stuff, they are kind of still pulling from, you know, stuff from Catholicism, but it's like occulted, weird, funny stories, you know.
Did you guys ever think it's weird too, like during the DNA grab of 2020, that certain people got more sick than others? Did you think that was weird? Because I did. I watched it as a nurse. I watched Darker Shades of Brown. We'll go there. Get very sick and or die. Yes, here in 2020. I don't know if that happened.
Right?
Yep. I think they've been figuring this out for a long time, ever since they gave people blankets for free.
Oh, yeah. Oh, one thing I do even want to.
That was definitely. Sorry, Nick.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Jen, and then I'll
no, I just want to say that I think that was very eugenicist. I think the tribes they targeted, because I do think that they believe that there are some Native people, some, not all, because as Heidi's made the case, like they're really good genealogists. So they kind of have everyone's ethno-linguistic affinity mRNA line, you could say, figured out. So they would say some tribes are actually distinct. And that's been a lot of.
Will they kill this easier than another? Would it diabolically enough to say, hey, if we put this in a pokey, would it kill the less better, like the lesser thans, right? It's weird. On tribes.
I'm not a good judge of these type of topics because I've gotten hit with so many things from the military over the years. I'm surprised I'm still moving.
Well, that's because you're immune.
We're the guinea pigs of a lot of these things before they go public in the first place. The troops, that is, you know.
But who survives it is an interesting tale, and I think there's a lot. Yeah.
That's probably the study, right? We'll give them. We'll see how many we can put in them, and see how many of them survive.
Yeah, I don't know. Jen's point is, I think, very interesting, because I think that what you're hitting on there is exactly what I've always been thinking since 2020, is this was a selection of who gets to be here. And I don't think they've fully unleashed that yet. But that's a guess.
Yeah.
It's all for entertainment purposes.
No, I've thought like stuff like that myself, so especially with Mormons. I think maybe you think this is a good time to wrap it up, or is there something else you want to cover before we go on? I mean, this might be a good time.
No.
Yeah, no, that was
I
really.
think you guys have had some amazing points. Thank you.
Yeah, this was really.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Thank you, guys.
Of course.
If I may add a closing point here, Nick, I'd like to add a closing point here on where the discussion started before we went full blown Mormon on everybody with the Sirhan Sirhan stuff and his Mormon business, right? So it is noted. I think it is very interesting. Again, the pioneering Mormon families still maintain a very strong power structure out west, and it is not exactly surprising. I didn't realize Ben Rich was a Mormon. Not exactly surprising, given his aerospace affinities along with Howard Hughes, right? They would be, this all makes sense. And again, employing folks like Thane Eugene Cesar make a lot of sense to me when they're kind of in this whole ancient alien cargo cult network of folks being process related apparently. So it's interesting to note the folks who dropped, or where RFK was before he got dropped off at the Ambassador Hotel that night for his murder. He was at a party over in Malibu along with folks like Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. So these things, with Sirhan being associated with the Polanskis already preceding this, Tate and Polanski, that I don't think any of these things should be ignored as sheer happenstance with these process elements. And again, I'm still not convinced that the processes, churches, and corporation documents that list a Council of the 70 there or sorry, a quorum of the 70. I'm not convinced that's not also the Mormons' quorum of the 70. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes you wonder with the quorum of the 50 that we know for sure that they said they allow, non-Mormons in there. So it's wild. It's wild. I
Weird.
think
It would be weird, but like I said, Voltron, right?
Which one is
Well-
higher? I'm sorry, guys. The 50 or the 70? Which in the
the
hierarchy?
50 is secret. The 50 is not supposed to be known, but
Thank you.
The
But
70 is
people
the
don't.
official operational body of the church, of the mothership in Salt Lake. They do all
The
the
mothership.
the mothership.
This actually makes a lot of sense. I won't. I know Nick wants to close it up, but
Okay.
there's a Kabbalistic kind of reasoning behind the numerology, even like why the 5 would hide behind the 7. It's kind of it's interesting.
You're gonna leave us like that, Jen?
One
Cliffhanger.
thing I did want to I'll leave people with to make up for Jin's cliffhanger. It's just I don't know if it's really opinion. I mean, it's kind of like how it is, but it's just my opinion. You should think about it. Is that even in Gnosticism, it is also based off of 3 books that were supposedly not included in the Bible. So I mean, even going off of that, I mean, obviously, in my opinion, even though it's not in the Bible, it's still coming from a Catholic source, or you know what I'm saying? It's interesting. Just want to add that in there. That's another reason why I do say I think there's Catholicism kind of in there. So again, thank you very much, Heidi, for coming on. That was amazing. I loved all the pictures. I loved the receipts. Sorry about that mishap before. It would be edited out. Nobody get to hear it, but unfortunately we did lose her for a few minutes. But she was a gangster and came
When
back.
they're like, "Hey, Heidi."
Yeah, I felt so bad. I was like, yo, she's not going to know for a while. She's got her pictures up in her face. But thank you so much. Please let everybody know where they can find your amazing show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a fun time. I love coming on with these guys and never feel bad to interrupt. I think it's such an amazing thing to have conversations, not just presentations. I am Heidi Luv at the Unfiltered Rise. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. I do have a Patreon if you want 2 extra shows a month. And I have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And I don't normally sound like this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Heidi. Yeah, and everybody, for the people who are just hearing her for the first time, go check out her stuff. Jen, the Ninja, what is going on? Please let everybody know where they can find your stuff as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much, Nick, for inviting me on this series with Heidi and JJ. It was great. I honestly learned so much, Heidi.
I wasn't sure if you'd come on, so thank you.
So, yeah, no, it's really interesting because I don't really know this history at all. This is kind of like, it's all brand new to me. So just like making interesting connections as Heidi's speaking. Maybe sounds a little Kabbalah schizo sometimes, but
I'm there with you.
I try
Don't
not
worry.
to. I try to,
I like it.
People want to find me, Threshold Saints, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts. We talk a lot about metafiction, and obviously Nick's been a guest, and Heidi's going to come on. JJ, I did Big Trouble in Little China on JJ, and that will drop on my feed sometime very soon. And yeah, thank you guys so much. It was really great.
Awesome. Thank you. And JJ, please let everybody know what's up with you.
Nick, always appreciate the conversation. Info, sir. Heidi, always great to link up and talk more business. In fact, I'm looking forward to our conversation here on Friday when you're a guest on mine and Nick's show. Fridays here every Friday night, 9 p.m. But this Friday with Heidi talking more Mormon stuff, and I'll bring some more of my thoughts on these questionable origin stories of the Mormon Church. As we know, it's already under question with some of these magical ceremonies, but I've kind of reverse engineered some thoughts on how some of these started and were the books that Joseph Smith used in which to make the Book of Mormon. There's one that's commonly identified, but he also used another book, in my opinion, from a founding father named Elias Boudinot. So it all goes back to the Society of Cincinnati. It all goes back to these mounds, but I got some interesting thoughts to go over with you on that for Fridays. And I think we were going to talk some bombing stuff too. I believe some Mark Hoffman stuff. So that
nice.
Looking forward to that.
Nice. And that is
I'll bring the code.
That is this Friday, correct? This Friday coming up, JJ? That is, right?
Yeah, this Friday coming up. Yep.
Oh wow, that's what. See, now this show is going to drop Saturday, and always drop that show Fridays on Saturday. So the Occult Rejects are going to
go back a day, and then
the Occult Rejects are going to get a double dose on Saturday. Heidi, she's going to be on both shows.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. All right.
I'm glad
This
you
is
brought
gonna
that
be
up because I
fun.
wasn't even thinking that.
Yeah, because I
Maybe
dropped
a public
Friday's show on Saturday, audio wise. People are gonna get 2 shows with her on it. Cool.
Hopefully my voice will be better by Friday. I know I sound ridiculous.
Yes, that's true. So if people listen to this first and you go back to the next to the
Right.
Fridays, you'll hear the
Time
difference.
travel.
I'm sure.
Making tricks.
Yeah.
Some
I
more
actually have a
magic on it.
question for Heidi before we close. As
Yeah,
the
of
last
course.
Go for it.
Anytime.
Heidi, do you think that do you think the Mormons believed that Howard Hughes was a magician?
I think the Mormons took something from Howard Hughes that he got from a not here entity, not from this planet. He definitely said under all his flight projects that he had encounters. It is rumored that he had his own hangar at Area 51 and that they called him in for multiple crashes. And I think that his crashes, being as an adept a pilot as he was, were purposeful, and that they might have been trying to punish him for not doing the things that they said. They wanted the bombing to stop. And he did specifically say things could come through, not always good, when there was that energy. So I think that Gay, who was his little errand boy, who became the top head of his whole corporation, got something from him while he was in an altered mental state. We'll put it that way.
Interesting.
They have the key. I'm gonna find out what the hell that key is. They drive me crazy. It's not the priesthood keys.
Oh, they got the keys.
Anyway,
Janice.
No,
Yes.
I definitely appreciate the conversation. And again, host of Operation GCD, JJ Vance, and Jen the Ninja. I highly recommend the Big Trouble Little China episode we did there, Jen. Jen the
That was
Ninja.
fun.
Hopefully you'll join me for a future occult esoteric review of The Golden Child, starring Eddie Murphy.
Oh, yo, I would love to do that with you guys.
Ooh.
I've actually thought about, I shit you not, I've thought about doing that on the Occult Rejects.
Oh yeah.
Oh, fuck,
Another
yo,
one
that
Steve.
show
You
is
guys
deep
are
as
so much
fuck.
fun.
Yo,
I've had the best time with everyone.
I would love to
Seriously,
do
you guys
that.
are awesome.
Yo, I
Nice.
swear to God, I think that movie is deep as shit with occult symbolism. As silly as it
Yeah,
sounds.
Eddie
absolutely.
Murphy definitely
It's-
understands.
I think you get into eyeball
Actually,
stuff,
Foley
believe it
into
or
bed,
not.
right?
Huh?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jen. What'd you say?
I think it's
Oh,
I said it's basically the character of Axel Foley, but he's in Tibet solving mysteries, dealing with Eastern voodoo practices, right, or Eastern mysticism, right?
Well, that's what they're all drawn to, right? Like, it's very clear. Even the people that say they're not, like, if they'll say explicitly, we're not really into Tantra. But yeah, you are. You're big liars, because they all they're drawing a lot from it, like so much so that it's obvious to me. And I'm not like some, great sage in the mountains, like, for real. So
they're all big liars. I like
Yeah.
that. I like that quote. Run with that.
Well, sounds like we got a new show coming up here on that one then in the future on Operation GCD.
Man,
But
download that shit today.
great conversation. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all again for coming on, and again, especially Heidi, all the work you did, and our newest addition to the Occult Rejects. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And that's the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.